Going live in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here we are. Hello everybody, thank you for clicking on this video. As you see, there's a little overlay there just inviting you to, if you haven't already, to come over and take a look at the video that I've created on the Sofa Patreon page, patreon.com/Simon on the Sofa. Best if you go over there, listen to that video, because that gives you a description of what I'm up to and what Patreon's all about and how you can continue to support Simon on the Sofa with all the good ideas I've got coming up, which is to continue doing the talks, continue reading this book. It's taken me, I think I started a year ago, and I think I'm probably the slowest reader ever. But anyway, I'm reading Charles Eisenstein's book, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. For a lot of people are reading all the chapters. I don't want to repeat myself on this, but for those who are reading the chapters or listening, it's good to know that you're benefiting. If you're new to this, is the first video you've watched, then we're going to be diving in at chapter 11 and just jump in, listen, see if you like it. This is the sort of book you can open any chapter and just start reading anyway. And just for those who are new to following this audio series, one woman sent me a message really going, why are you reading somebody else's book? And I thought that was quite an interesting question, because don't we read other people's books all the time? I've been reading hundreds of books for years, and that's how we learn. They're like the maps of our world. That's how we learn from other people. That's how we get an insight into what's happening and other people's perspectives. So I'm reading this book because it's opened my mind to different perspectives, and I want to share it with the world as we all co-create the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. Or if how I look at it is strip away all the crap and all the rubbish that we've built up that's blocked us from realizing that we're already living on a fantastic, magical, beautiful world, but then we decided to destroy it for profit and gain and personal achievement, gratification, and all that other madness that most of you listening to these talks will know about. Okay, let us dive in. Morphogenesis. Sometimes when I encounter pioneers in a certain domain or alternative culture, I get the feeling that even if they're doing their work on a small scale, perhaps when we're in a small eco-village, an isolated prison, a single community in a war zone or gang zone, that they are doing that work on behalf of us all. And that the changes they make in themselves create a kind of template that the rest of us can follow and do in a short time what took them decades of effort and learning. When I see, for example, how my friend R has, in the face of near impossible odds, so profoundly healed from being abused as a child, I think, if she can heal, it means that millions like her can too. And her healing soothes the path for them. Sometimes I take it even a step further. One time at a men's retreat, one of the participants showed us burn scars on his penis, the result of cigarette burns administered by a foster parent when he was 5 years old to punish him. The man was going through a powerful process of release and forgiveness. In a flash, I perceived that his reason for being here on earth was to receive and heal from this wound as an act of world-changing service to us all. I said to him, Jay, if you accomplish nothing else this lifetime but to heal from this, you'll have done the world a great service. The truth of that was palpable to all present. The rational mind, steeped in separation, doubts that his healing could really make a difference. It says only if it is somehow made public, for example, turned into a motivational story, could it have an effect on the world beyond that man's direct influence. I do not deny the power of story. Maybe Jay's healing is having an influence via my telling of it now. However, story is only one of the possible vectors of manifestation of a more general phenomenon. One of the ways that your project, your personal healing, or your social invention can change the world is through story. But even if no one ever learns of it, even if it's invisible to every human on earth, it will have no less of an effect. The principle I'm invoking here is called Morphic Resonance. a term coined by the biologist Rupert Sheldrake. It holds as a basic property of nature that forms and patterns are contagious. That once something happens somewhere, it induces the same thing to happen elsewhere. One of his favorite examples is certain substances such as turanoids and exilatoy, which were reliable liquid for many years until suddenly around the world they began to crystallize. Chemists sometimes spend years trying to make crystalline forms of a substance. Once they are successful, it is henceforward easy, as if the substance has learned how to do it. There's also a great example of the 100th monkey, and there was an example of the 4-minute mile, where so many people were trying to do the 4-minute mile and it happened, and then all of a sudden everybody around the world could do it. And there was another story of magpies that were trying to take off the silver caps of milk bottles in years gone by, when the caps of the milk were silver, gold, and so on. That when one could do it, all of a sudden everyone can do it. So this is what morphic resonance is representing. Sheldrake discusses the possibility that this phenomenon could be explained by seed particles, little bits of crystal blown by the wind or carried in the beard of a visiting chemist that find their way into a supersaturated solution and initiate crystallization. So, he says, let us test the theory of morphic resonance by quarantining a sample in a dust-filtered lab. If crystals still formed more readily there, he says it would prove the theory of morphic resonance. I agree with Sheldrake that certain features of the crystallization mystery defy the seed particle explanation, and that his experiment would disprove it. I disagree, however, that the seed particle explanation, if true, invalidates the morphic field explanation. Quite the opposite. The general principle of morphic resonance pertains whether or not the vector of its transmission is crystal dust. If the quarantine experiment works, one might demand it be electromagnetically shielded as well, since the seed could be an electromagnetic vibration. And there may be influences that we don't even know about. Sheldrake seems to want to separate morphic resonance from any kind of direct causation. But what if all these causal influences are not alternatives to morphic field induction, but rather examples of how that field operates? Question mark. Here we have the chance to expand the realm of matter to include the properties of spirit, rather than to appeal to something extra material in order to bestow intelligence on a dead material world. In a similar vein, it may very well be through others hearing about it that our personal, relational, or local transformations have global significance. It may also be through the ripple effect of changed people changing other people. These are both mechanisms of transmission, of cause and effect, that our separation conditioned minds can accept. What we have trouble accepting, though, is that the effect of our actions doesn't depend on these mechanisms, which are merely means for the implementation of a general metaphysical law. Even if no one ever finds out about your act of compassion, even if only the visible witness is a dying person, the effect is no less than if someone makes a feature documentary about it. I love that. I love how it doesn't always have to be seen and recognized. Our change, our personal transformation, it happens within and it has an impact on the whole. I'm not suggesting that we therefore repudiate conventional means for the propagation of our work. I'm advocating a kind of confidence in the significance of all that we do, even when our vision cannot operate the mysterious, meandering paths through which our actions arrive in the larger world. There's a kind of senselessness in the most beautiful acts. The acts that change the world most profoundly are the ones that the mind of separation cannot fathom. Imagine if Kalidasan had set out taking care of his mother-in-law with the agenda of making big public show of his devotion. It would have stunk of hypocrisy. The same is true of, say, peace-building projects or eco-villages that too soon develop a self-conscious image of themselves as an example. Please don't think that you have to write a book about it for your experiences to have a large effect. The book may come, the peace building project or documentary might come, but usually there must first be a latency, a time of doing something for its own sake, a time of inward focus on the goal and not the meta goal. The magic comes from that place. From there, the synchronicities flow. There's no sense of forcing, only of participating in a larger happening that seems to have an intelligence of its own. You show up in the right place at the right time. You respond to practical needs. Can you believe that changing an old woman's bedpan can change the world? Can you? If you do it to change the world, it will not. If you do it because she needs her bedpan changed, then it can. Many years ago, Patsy, my wife at the time, was a real estate agent. Her client's mother, Mrs. K, was terminally ill and lived in a derelict house outside of town. One day, Patsy went to the house to take some measurements and found Mrs. K lying on the floor in her own urine and excrement, unable to get up. Patsy spent an hour cleaning her up and gave her the egg drop soup she'd bought for her own lunch, the only nourishing food Mrs. K had had for a long time, as the son was working 2 jobs and living an hour away. Mrs. K died soon after. A day later, the house caved in, as if it had been held together by Mrs. K's habits and memories. At the time, Patsy never imagined that this basic human response to a woman in need would or could change the world. It didn't cross her mind at all, nor should it have. Her choice to help was a choice between compassion and the practical demands of her busy schedule. Part of her mind was chattering. "Oh, just call the police. You're going to miss your other appointments. This isn't your responsibility. What does it matter?" But on some level, she knew that it did matter. So many voices lobby us to forget love, forget humanity, sacrifice the present and the real for the sake of what seems more practical. Herein lies the medicine of despair. By evacuating our illusions of practicality, it reconnects us to the present needs at hand and allows those senseless, impractical acts that generate miracles. I love that. Read that again. Herein lies the medicine of despair. By evacuating our illusions of practicality, it reconnects us to the present needs at hand and allows those senseless, impractical acts that generate miracles. The principle of morphic resonance then justifies our feeling that these senseless, invisible acts are somehow significant. What morphic field does, it induces to trust the promptings of compassion. What morphic field does, what morphic field does it induce to give us the best you can of your gifts to meet the needs at hand. Imagine if our politicians and corporate executives were caught up in this field, acting from compassion rather than calculation, from humanity rather than abstract instrumental motives. No doubt some of you are thinking, Einstein seems to think that if everyone just focuses on taking care of his or her grandmother and picking up litter in the park, that global warming, imperialism, racism, and the rest of the catastrophic problems facing our planet will magnificently fix themselves. Eisenstein fosters a dangerous passivity, a complacency that leaves people imagining they are doing something useful while the world burns. The last few chapters should make it clear that this is not what Eisenstein thinks. But just to be sure, let me address this criticism head on. After all, I've heard it not only from others, but also with much greater frequency in my own head. I love that. The doubts, the seeds of doubt are deep. First, the personal, local, or invisible actions I have been discussing do not preclude other kinds of actions, such as writing a book or organizing a boycott. In fact, listening to the call and trusting the timing of the former foster the same disposition towards the latter. I am talking about a wholesale movement into a place of interbeing and acting from that place in each kind of situation. The universe calls forth different of our gifts at different moments. When the call is for the small and personal, Let us heed that, so that we develop the habit of heeding it when it is big and public. Let's cease listening to the logic of separation, which would devalue the small and personal. Just as the vectors of morphic resonance may be something quite mundane, so also the actions for creating the impossible might each, on their own, be quite linear and practical. It is their orchestration that is beyond our capacity. Many of us, pressed by the urgency of the planetary situation, have experienced trying to do big things that amounted to nothing. We write a book and no one publishes it. We shout the truth from blogs and no one gets it, except the already converted, except sometimes it is different. When and why? I'm sure many of you listening to this or have read this book know that that's the case for many. When my elder two children were young, I was for several years a stay-at-home dad, immersed in a world of diapers and groceries while trying to write my first book. I often felt terribly frustrated, torturing myself with thoughts like, I have such important things to share with the world, and here I am changing diapers and cooking all day. These thoughts distracted me from the gift at hand and made me less present with my children. I did not understand at those moments when I gave in to my situation, put down my writing, and fully engaged my children had just as powerful an effect on the universe as any book I would write. We don't always have the eyes to see it, but everything has its karmic effect. Or as the Western religions say, God sees everything. Imagine yourself on your deathbed, looking back on your life. What moments will seem the most precious? What choices will you be the most grateful for? For Patsy, it will be cleaning up Miss K more than any real estate she sold. For me, it will be pushing Jimmy and Matthew up the hill in their toy cars more than any public accomplishment I have recorded. On my deathbed, I will be grateful for each choice of connection, love, and service. Can you countenance a universe in which those deathbed perceptions are wrong? Can you countenance a universe in which we must steel ourselves to neglect those things so that we can more effectively devote ourselves to the business of planet saving? Can you see that steeling ourselves to override our humanity is what has gotten us into this mess to begin with? That is the old story. We're nearly done with conquering ourselves, just as we're nearly done trying to conquer nature. Thankfully, our entry into the world of interbeing no longer need oppose what science tells us about the nature of reality. We can begin to embrace new scientific paradigms that affirm the understanding that the universe is intelligent, purposive, and whole. Purposive and whole. These new paradigms arouse the ear of the old guard precisely because they affirm such an understanding. That is why they are called unscientific or pseudoscientific. Not because they draw on inferior evidence or incoherent thinking, but because they violate the deep, unquestioned premises that the word scientific has encoded. Let's get real here. If everything has consciousness, then what we had believed possible, practical and realistic is far too limiting. We are on the cusp of an epochal breakthrough, coming into touch with the mind of nature. And what can we achieve when we are in harmony with it, question mark? I mean, come on, let's get real. As the opposite of its unusual meaning, which would be to ignore the unmeasurable and the subjective in favor of what can be quantified and controlled. That mentality has put vast human capacities out of reach. The technologies of reunion that include much of what we call alternative or holistic today all draw in one way or another from the principle of interbeing. I'll read that again. That mentality has put vast human capacities out of reach. The technologies of reunion that include much of what we call alternative or holistic today all draw in one way or another from the principle of interbeing. The contradiction between small personal acts of compassion and steps to save the environment is a straw man, a contrapositive rhetorical device constructed by the cynic to voice his wound of powerlessness. In truth, The habit of acting from love will naturally apply to all our relationships, expanding alongside our understanding. Acts of ecological or social healing, so long as they are in earnest and not secretly designed to establish an identity or prove oneself good, are just as senseless as the small personal ones. They are senseless because they are a drop in the bucket. What can one person do? Question mark. As I have said, despair is inescapable in the old story. The alternative, an interconnected, intelligent universe, empowers those acts, but at a price for the activist. It equally empowers the small-scale acts that don't fit into her save the world paradigm at all. It makes her climate change awareness campaign no more and no less important than changing the bedpans in the hospice. But again, would you really like to live in any other world? A friend recently asked me, if it's true we live at a unique juncture in the planet's history, when all great beings have gathered for the crucial moment of humanity's birthing, then why do we not see the great avatars and miracle workers of yesteryear? My answer was that they are here, but they are working behind the scenes. One of them might be a nurse, a garbage man, a kindergarten teacher. They don't do anything big or public, nothing that through our eyes looks like it is generating the miracles necessary to save our world. Our eyes deceive us. These people are holding the fabric of the world together. They are holding the space for the rest of us to step into. To do the big public thing is important, requiring all our gifts of courage and genius, but it requires not nearly the faith and solidity in the ground of interbeing as the invisible, humble actions of people like those kindergarten teachers. So whatever your reasons for choosing to do great things or small, do not let them be the urgent, fearful belief that only the big public things have any chance of influencing the masses and saving the world. As I will describe later in the book, part of the revolution in which we are participating is a revolution in how we make our choices. To do the possible, the old way works fine. When we have a map from A to B, we can just follow the directions. But now is not that time. The calculable results are not enough. We need miracles. We have caught a glimpse of our destination, the destination that hope foretells, but we have no idea how to get there. We walk an invisible path with no map and cannot see where any turning will lead. I wish I could say that the new story provides a map, but it does not. It can, however, remove the disorientating fog of habits and beliefs, leftovers of the old paradigms that obscure our internal guidance system. The principles of interbeing do not, on their own, offer a formula for decision-making. Even if you accept that I and the world are one, you will not be able to distinguish whether it will benefit all sentient beings more to stay home and reduce your carbon emissions or to drive the rally to protest fracking. To attempt such a calculation draws from the old story, which seeks to quantify everything, to add up the effects of any action and to make choices accordingly. That way of making choices is useful only in certain narrow circumstances. In particular, those in which cause and effect are more or less linear. It is appropriate for many engineering problems and financial decisions. It is the mindset of the actuary, weighing risks and payoffs. The new story, however, is a much bigger change than to revalue the risks and seek new payoffs. It is not going to help you make choices from the calculating mind, but it will provide a logical framework within which our heart-based choices make a lot more sense. Whoa, big chapter, big chapter. That was one of the biggest chapters so far, Morphogenesis. So there you go. Listen to that again. You can look under this video and you can see all the chapters I recorded. You can look under this video and see links to where you can get this book online. You can read it for free or as a gift, should I say, on Charles's website. You can get the book, of course, anywhere else. Maybe people are sharing it online as a gift. Morphogenesis. Wow. Every little act is having an impact. Don't compare yourself. I think you need to be doing the big thing, especially not for the wrong reasons. That's the message I take away from here. Let's all connect to that place of love. Connect to that place of truth. Connect to that place of inner knowing, innate wisdom. And just act from what we as individuals know to be true in any given moment. Beautiful chapter. I leave it there. Thank you for listening. Thank you for co-creating this magnificent, beautiful world, which we leave a message for the next generations. We are the role models for our youth, for the younger generations. And we have to do the inner work, erase all of the conditioned programs of separation and fear and core unworthiness and the story of imperfection and all the other negative pain body scarcity mentalities that we've picked up, and step into interbeing, step into the new story, step into that unity, that reunion with self. Beautiful. What a time to be alive. You're amazing. Keep laughing, keep smiling, keep believing in you. You're here, you're on planet Earth. Wow, it's enough. Why are you here? Why are you alive? Woo, sing on.